Welcome to Let's Play Battlefield 1942. On today's episode, the Battle of Tobruk. This is a British versus Germans in North Africa map, and the Germans have an uncapturable base, while the British have a whole bunch of capturable bases, no uncapturables. The Germans' objective is to just get at least one base to stop the bleeding right at the beginning, make use of all the tanks here at the uncapturable base, and hope that their assault doesn't get stopped before they can get one base. The British job is to defend those bases as best they can, marshalling all of their tanks from their various different spawn points, and bring the tanks against any individual Axis attack. The first minute or so of this map is extremely important because it can decide whether or not the Germans can get a quick victory and get a little beachhead onto these flags here, or whether or not the British will have time to stop that initial advance. The Germans' best opportunity to get a flag is at the very beginning, before the British have a chance to bring in their tanks from all the different spawn points. There's a British tank that spawns in the middle here at the front row, one each in the two middle row, and two tanks that spawn in the very back. Now, we've done a good job by at least getting one flag right at the very beginning. I think we had an advantage in terms of people loading up the game first and getting at least a couple tanks there moving toward the southeastern flag before the British could roll in. Generally speaking, the British do have a good chance of stopping the Axis from getting even one flag on this map. And the reason for that is often the Germans will send tanks toward different flags and they'll get killed piecemeal as opposed to going in as one group. Or the British will have at least one infantry hiding somewhere within the capture radius, preventing an Axis capture and allowing the British reinforcements to roll in. I like to attack the northern flag on the first row first, if given the opportunity, because the British tend to have fewer people there, and if you get that one, it's easier to roll in toward the second row unstopped. The issue that I had on this round is the other German tanks were rolling, as they almost always do, toward the southern flag on the first row. And if you want to roll in as one group and you can't make the other people do what you want, obviously you've just got to follow them. So when I saw them rolling in, I decided to go along with them. Once the Germans have stopped the bleeding initially, and as long as they don't get bled again, they should have a pretty good time on this map. See on the tickets that we're already leading by about 40, and we're the ones with the uncapturable base. It's not as if they can cap all of our flags out, whereas we can beat them just by beating them on tickets, or we can capture all of their bases and beat them that way. Common tactic here on capturing a flag using just your one tank is to launch one tank shell after another into the bunker until it goes neutral, just killing them as they spawn if they try to defend that way. Alternatively, you can keep your distance and just spawn camp the flag until they stop spawning in there, then turn neutral. So this is a good starting for the Germans. We've got all three of the first row flags. The British have the other three flags. They've still got 4 out of their 5 tanks, though, that can potentially spawn, and that includes, or that doesn't include, 2 additional artillery pieces. I usually don't include the artillery in the count because they're a lot less useful than the tanks. The British aren't in a bad position, I would say. They do have their most important flags. They haven't lost their back base or anything crazy like that, which sometimes happens. Sometimes the Germans will send their one jeep all the way around back at the very beginning. Usually that fails. But the British have a good chance of just continuing to put pressure on the flags in the front row, and they can get them back. There's always the chance that the British could capture all of the capturable flags and push us back to the main base and start bleeding us again. since we've gotten a good beachhead here, and more than that, I'll start spawning in as an infantry. The infantry can do a good job of it, at the very least neutralizing the enemy flags and putting the pressure on all the allied infantry that spawn in. Your grenades can also be used to destroy the artillery in particular. The Germans are now down to one flag. Maybe they'll get that second one, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. The British do have a good opportunity to just counterattack at the front row flags and push us back. The main difficulty that the Germans have with this map, other than being bled out at the beginning, is that the German tanks primarily spawn at the main base. They can also get tanks that they capture from these capturable flags, but mostly they're spawning way back at the main base, which is much further than where the British tanks spawn in, which is at the British main and the other British capturable flags. So the British have a much easier time spawning in and bringing up their tanks to reinforce, whereas the Germans may be disinclined to even spawn in at the main base once they've captured some flags. If you notice that the Germans are bringing just none of their tanks from the main base, that's a situation where you want to start spawning in at the main, even if you've got a couple flags. This middle flag in the front row is not a very good one to rely upon. It's easily neutralized by the enemy because it has a very large capture radius. So they can just sneak someone in and hide anywhere in that radius and turn it neutral, and then all of a sudden you've got nowhere to spawn in except your main base. One other advantage the British really hold, especially at the beginning of this map, is that when they hold all the flags and then just one turns neutral, all the British tanks on that side, everyone on their team knows exactly where to go. So they kind of move as a unit even though they may not have any deliberate teamwork. They may just, by nature, seeing one place that's being attacked, they all bring the entirety of their force down on that one area. The Germans, on the other hand, you know, they go individually. They try to attack different flags from each other. They usually don't go in as one group. Once the Germans do get a couple flags, it's a lot easier for them, though, because the British have multiple areas where they might want to counterattack. So the British are no longer operating as one unit, and it takes some of the difference away in teamwork. Stay tuned for part 2 of Tobruk.